Hi, it's Jenny from Buggy Baby, and today we're going to take a look at the Out and About single pushchairs. So we've got here the GT, the Nipper single, and the Sport pushchair. And as you can see, all three of them are three-wheelers, but they all have slightly different uses. So what we're going to do is go through the differences between them. We can look at the things that are the same between them as well, to work out which one would be the best for you. So we're going to start off with some basics first. So we'll talk about the retail price and also the weight of all three of them. So over here, the Sport, this retails at £495 and this weighs about 9.8 kilos. Then £475 for the Nipper single. That's around the same weight as a Sport, so about 9.8 as well. And then the GT is the lightest of the range, also the cheapest. So this retails at £459 and this weighs in at 8.8. Another useful thing to know for all three of these, they are all car seat compatible. So what you would need to do is buy the adapters and then choose a compatible car seat to go with it. And you can actually add a carry cot to both the GT and the Nipper, and that will allow you to have two different options as to how you'd like to have your newborn in there. And of course, if you want to, they can go straight into the seat. So all three of them you can use from newborn, and they all take your child up to about 4 years of age. And the weight limit for all of them are 22 kg. Now, within that weight limit, you do need to bear in mind anything that you have in the baskets or in the hoods or sitting on the pushchair, that would all be included in that total weight limit. So a little bit about Out and About. They are mainly targeted at rural areas. That's where you're most likely going to see them. You're definitely less likely to see them in a built-up area, in a town, in a city. And the reason for that is they are aimed to be all-terrain pushchairs. So they are very popular. If you're out in the countryside, you're very likely to see them. And not only is it because they have fabulous tyres, it's also because they're quite basic in their design, which makes them really easy to maintain. So the fabric across this range, all three of them, are very hard wearing and really easy to wipe clean, which is obviously what you need when you are pushing the pushchair around in any muddy areas. Another thing with the brand is that they actually offer a double in all three of these pushchairs, which is fantastic. To have a double pushchair that's all-terrain is so useful, and they're also fairly slim for double pushchairs as well. So there's a really nice range. There's no frills to any of them. Like I said, they're quite basic, but they do exactly what you need them to do, which is what you want when you're actually buying an all-terrain pushchair. Okay, so let's look in a little bit more detail about the differences between all three of them. Now, you can see as we're looking straight ahead that they're all slightly different sizes. Obviously, our Sport is the biggest. You can see it's got the largest tyres, and it's actually the longest of them because of the tyres. And then the Nipper is also fairly long, has larger tyres than our GT. Now, the tyres are a big difference between all three of these. So if we start off by looking at our GT here, these tyres here are EVA tyres. So they are foam-filled tyres. What that means for you is that there is generally no maintenance on them. As with any wheels, you obviously want to have a little look through over them occasionally, make sure that they're all in good condition, but they are puncture proof, so you can use them on your off-road walks and you don't need to worry about inflating your tyre or getting a puncture. An EVA tyre is a good halfway house between having a plastic wheel and having an air-filled wheel, so they are going to be better on all-terrain than any plastic wheel you can purchase, but they won't be as good as an air-filled tyre, and that is because there isn't any give in them, so they are hard, solid tyres. And therefore, going over bumps will not be quite as easy as it would be if you had an air-filled tyre. However, because Out and About, I'll show you here, have really fantastic suspension on them. You can see how big this wire is here. Even though they are harder tyres, the suspension will make it easier for you to push it over all terrain, which is really great. So if you want a all-terrain pushchair, but actually in everyday life you're not, going through the countryside every day, or perhaps you don't live in a really rural area, but you want to have something that's easier in the park, or like on a little walk through not such an all-terrain field, then these would be good for you. And also, they'll be perfect around town as well. So like I said, they're a good halfway house. However, if you live in a very rural area, perhaps if you step out of your door and you're straight onto a bumpy lane or a road, or immediately you have to cross fields, anything like that, if it's more rural, an air-filled tyre, which the Nipper has, is really going to be the better option for you. So the air-filled tyre is a really good size on the Nipper, exactly what you want for everyday use when you're living in the countryside. And it's got nice give to it, you can see here, and that's what makes it really nice to push over any bumps. Again, you've got this fantastic suspension at the back here, which is just going to help make it even more smooth for you. But an air-filled tyre will require some occasional maintenance, just as a bicycle tyre would. They can get a puncture. You will need to inflate them on the odd occasion, and they do have an inner tube inside of them, which if you're having problems pumping up your tyre and you can't see an obvious puncture but it still won't inflate, it's probably the inner tube inside of it. However, I've used a off-road freewheeler very similar to this, and I only ever suffered from one puncture in the few years that I used it. So although it can happen, it doesn't mean it's going to happen all the time. You just want to give it some maintenance, check them over occasionally, and like I said, be aware that there's this inner tube in here, and it may well be the inner tube that's damaged if you're having any problems inflating your tyre. An air-filled tyre will also be just as great through an urban area. The only real difference you'll have with this type of pushchair in an urban area is obviously it's quite long, so it may well get in people's ways if you're in and out of shops, but it will still be just as great to push on, a smooth pavement in a town as it would be on any all-terrain. Then we have the Sport. Now, you can see here, this is a fixed front wheel. So unlike our Nipper and our GT, which have swivel wheels, this one here is designed for running. So therefore, it has a fixed front wheel. And that is for your safety, because obviously you don't want the wheel jiggling around when you're running. And it means that you can go in a nice straight line. But what that does mean for the Sport is it is for running and for real off-road use. So if you do lots of forest walks, if you live near a beach and perhaps you walk through the sand dunes, anything like that, this sort of pushchair is going to be great for, because when you're going through really tough all-terrain, you would be advised to lock the front wheel to stop it moving around. And obviously, as this is a fixed front wheel, you can see that this is perfect for really rough all-terrain, or if you're running. It's not advisable to run with either the Nipper or the GT. It's just something to note. If it's a running pushchair you're after, it would be the Sport that you'd want to go for. Now we can see the really lovely large air tyres here, and that is what's going to give you a really nice smooth ride when you're running with it, or if you're taking a walk over really rough terrain. Now the tyres are really the biggest difference between all three, and that's because, as you can see when we went through the 3 different tyres, they all allow the pushchairs to be used for slightly different reasons. So, like I said, if you're living in a less rural area, but perhaps you like to go on the occasional off-road walk, or you go to the park a lot, anything like that, then GT would be great for you. If you live in the countryside, don't look at the GT, go straight for the air-filled tyres. That's what you're going to need to have. and this would be the perfect all-rounder for you. You can use that when you're in the countryside, when you go to a town to visit. It's going to serve every single purpose that you need and be great for you to push. Now, if you're a runner, if you like to do more extreme off-road things, like I said, like walking through the forest, anything like that, then you would go for this. So you can see the tyres is really a big deal in terms of what out and about you're going to choose. Right, let's look at the seats next. So you can see all three of these seats have removable bumper bars. And actually these bumper bars, if we show you here, are so easy to use. There's this little red clasp. It's the same through all three of them. You lift it up and then the pin just removes. And there you go, you've got it removed, and it's on a hinge, so you just have to remove one, you don't have to remove them both, and you can get your baby in and out. And if you want to pop adapters on, you would just remove the bumper bar, put the adapters on, and then you can attach your carry cot or your car seat. Now, while we're talking about the carry cot and car seat, one of the things with freewheelers is obviously you can't do rearward facing with any of these. The only way you can do parent facing is by using the carry cot or the car seat. So that's just something to bear in mind if you are a parent that really wants to have your child facing you for longer. You won't be able to do that on any of these out and about pushchairs. Now, all three of them come with a seat liner included, and you would put that seat liner on to provide a nicer seat area for your child to sit on. You can see behind there, they're quite hard. They're not particularly comfortable without the seat liner. And the great thing about having a separate seat liner is that you can remove it to clean it, which is really useful. All of the seats throughout this whole range are a really nice wide size. You've got plenty of room in there as your child grows, so it's not going to be any problem when they're a toddler and they need more space. You're not going to be squeezing them in. They've got lovely deep seats, and they're okay in height. They're not the highest I've seen in terms of seats, but there's certainly plenty of room as your child grows. The 5-point harness is the same on all three of them, so there's really not much difference to the seats at all. I would say they are, pretty similar, especially with the GT and the Nipper. You've got the same amount of spacing in them, and they've got the same features as well. Now, looking at the footrests, you can see they're slightly different footrests. You just different shapes, really. There's not much difference in terms of how you're going to use them, but the GT here is just a slightly different shape from our Nipper, and the Nipper one is slightly longer as well. And then obviously here again on the Sport, again it's a slightly different shape, and obviously this footplate here is protecting part of the wheel. It's keeping it all straight, so really they're not going to be any different in terms of use. They just have a slightly different look. Right, let's look at the hoods next. There we go. Right, so all three hoods are out. You can see immediately the GT is a slightly different hood. You've got this extra bit of mesh here, just to add a little bit more protection, but all three hoods provide really good coverage. So it's going to protect not only from the sun, but also the wind, the rain, especially when your child's lying flat in there. You can see that they're going to have loads of protection from the sides of the pushchair and then from the hoods. Another difference on the hoods, other than this mesh, is that on the Sport and the Nipper, there is storage on the hoods. So you have these zipped areas here on both sides, which gives loads of storage for you to pop your valuables in. I'll show you here on the Sport, exactly the same. And obviously if you're running on the Sport, it's quite nice because you'll be able to stick your phone in there as well. We don't have this storage on the GT. And there's a reason for that. When we have a look at the baskets, you'll see why they're slightly different. And all three of them have a little peekaboo window. So they're all exactly the same in that respect. And obviously for you, what that's going to mean is if you're trying to get your child to sleep and you don't want to disturb them, you'll be able to just open that up and check whether they're asleep or not. Right, let's spin these round and we'll have a look at the handlebars and the baskets. Here we go. And on our Sport, it's not quite so easy to turn because the front wheel doesn't swivel, so you kind of have to lift it around. Right, so out and about, all of their pushchairs, you can actually move the handle around to whichever height you want, which is extremely useful. So if you have a partner, one of you's small, one of you's tall, you're covered. You don't have to worry about the height of the handle when you're buying the pushchair. So all of them work in the same way. They've got these little black buttons. You would push them in and then you would just move it lower, middle, and then to the highest setting here. So as I said, exactly the same on all three of them. Now let's have a look at the baskets. So if you can see here, we're looking at the GT. The GT has a rather small basket, but you could fit, what do I think you could fit in there? Probably not an awful lot, but you could squeeze in there a small bag and a few essentials. Then if you have a look here at our Nipper and also our Sport, let me pull this up so we can have a better look. You can see we don't have baskets underneath either of these. What you have instead is basically a little pouch, which you just release with this pull string. So again, you can't get too much in there. You could just get a few essentials. But with the Nipper, you can, if you want to, purchase a basket separately, and that will provide you a little bit more space. All three of the seats recline in exactly the same way, so they all have this strap, which means that you can put your seats in any position you want. There's no set settings, and they all work in the same way. You've got these little black mechanism here that you push in and you let it down, and then you'll have to give the seat a push if there's not a child in there, and then the seat will just come down to whichever setting you like. All three have exactly the same brake system, so you put your foot down to lock it and then you put your foot underneath to flick it up. So no difference there at all. The only difference really with the brakes is that the Sport also has a handbrake on the handle, and that's so that if you're running with it and you need to keep control of your speed, you can just lock that front wheel, slow the front wheel down by using the handle on the brake. Another nice feature that is across all three of these pushchairs is that there is extra ventilation here at the back. So when you've got your child lying flat, perhaps they're napping, something like that, and it's a hot day, you maybe want to provide a little bit more ventilation for them. These zips on the side here allow you to do that. So you see here, you bring that up, and then you've got this mesh, and that's just going to let some air circulation go through to your child while still providing protection from any flies or anything like that might be around. So that's across the whole range, and it's a really nice little added extra, that. So an interesting thing to look at while we've got all three of them together is that you can see the suspension on the GT. You've got slightly less of it than you do have on the Nipper and also on the Sport. And as we discussed earlier, that's just because the GT is meant to be a halfway house between being all-terrain and you being able to use it, you know, in a town, whereas these two really are all-terrain pushchairs designed for complete off-road use. Both the GT and our Nipper are really nice to push. I am a lover of air-filled wheels, so I always think that an air-filled wheel does feel nicer to push, just because you can't feel any bumps at all, and it's really comfortable for your child, and also it's a nice comfortable push for you. But the GT is lovely and light, especially for a three-wheeler. I mean, really so nice and light, and also really nice to push. It just won't be quite as tip-top to push as the Nipper would be if you are going over very bumpy terrain. Now, the Sport feels a lot harder to push, and that is because of the fixed front wheels. So there's no real manoeuvrability in it, and if you need to manoeuvre it around, you're going to have to tip it up onto the back two wheels to be able to turn it round into whatever direction you want to go to. All three pushchairs have foam handles, so if we were to take this off, underneath it would be foam. And as with any foam handle, you just need to be a little bit careful that you don't rip it, that you take care of it, because they are quite easy to rip and tear. So you just need to be a little bit careful with those foam handles. Right, let's turn these back round. And I can show you on both our Nipper and our GT, we have lockable front wheels here. And what that means is if it is quite bumpy terrain and this wheel is moving around everywhere, you can lock it into position, which will make it easier for you to drag it through. And they work in exactly the same way. There's these little bits here which will get it into the locked position. So you put it out and then you slide it in, and then our wheel's locked, and then we put it out and slide it round, and then our wheel can move. All three are really easy to put together. They go together in exactly the same way. The only difference is with the Sport is that you actually screw the footplate on, whereas our Nipper and our GT, the footplates are already on. So all you're doing is putting the free wheels on the pushchairs, which is really simple. And we have got separate videos for all three of these to show you how you put them together. It's really going to take you no time at all. Another thing to note, all three come with a rain cover, so that's one less thing you need to worry about, which is great. Right, last difference is the fold. So the GT is slightly different to fold than the Nipper and the Sport, and with all out and about pushchairs, they always advise that you put the seat fully forward, you put the brake on, and then you put the pushchair down. So hood back as well. Hood back, we'll do it with the GT first. Gosh, it's just so light to manoeuvre this is. It's so nice. Right, so we bring the seat all the way up. Try to make sure all the fabrics aren't caught. And then what you do, again, this is the same across all three. They all have these little pieces here, which you pull up. And what that's going to do is then release the frame. Now, it's not going to collapse once you've done that or anything like that. Let's push this in. But it's ready to then fold. Now with the GT, here, can you see pull to fold? What you're going to do is pull that up and your pushchair folds down. So there you go. Let's put it this way round so you can see better what the fold is like. Okay, so it's really quick, really easy to fold, not going to give you any issues. Also, it's a one-handed fold for the GT. Now, it's not a one-handed fold for these two. They are slightly different in how we're going to fold them, but we do need to do exactly the same thing. We need to have hood up, we need to have seat up, we need to lock it. There we go. And with this, we are going to release these grey bits here, but instead of having a little handle to pull, it's got a latch here, and what you're going to do is release that latch, and then using the handlebar, push it down. There we go. And we're going to do the same thing with the Sport. So using this latch, release the latch, use the handlebar to push it down. And I can see there we've got the seat caught. So we'll just move that. And there we have all three folded. Right, so this is them when they are folded down. Now you can see straight off the Sport is absolutely massive when it's folded down, and that is just because of the size of the wheels. So what you might want to do if you're looking to get the Sport is to take the wheels off if you haven't got enough room in your car boot or at home to store it like this. And it is really simple just to remove the wheels, and it's the same across all three of these. There's a little latch here. You see this little red bit, there's a latch just underneath here, which you push up and the wheel just comes off. It's really easy to do. The only thing you'll want to be aware of if you're putting the tyres on and off all the time is just to be really careful with them when you store them on top of the pushchair. Obviously, being air-filled tyres, you could cause some damage. You don't want to do that, so you just want to be really careful. And then it just clicks into place. And the front wheels, again, Works the same for all three of them. What you would do is unlock this little latch here, and then if you use this little bolt, you unscrew it, that releases the wheel. And in fact, if we take them all off for you, so you can see what they look like without the wheels, you can see there immediately you've got loads more space to store it. This would definitely get in most car boots and would be easy to store at home. And then you would just really make sure you place the tyres carefully on top or to the side, just so that they're stored away nicely. Like I said, you can do the same for all three of them, and that will create more space because you don't have this big wheels in the front in the way, and just makes it easy to get in and out of a boot. Right, so let's pop these wheels back on. Get this one back on. And it's so easy to pop these back on. So, slots through. Get it into place. I say so easy, and I can't do it first time, but it is easy. You just got to make sure you've got enough space. There we go. And then you would tighten that bolt. And then you would just lock it. There we go. So the tyre's back on. Right, so let's get them back up now so you can see how they unfold. Now there is a clasp here, which you need to undo, otherwise it won't move. And it's easier to get hold of the handle to unfold it. There we go. And the GT is nice and light, so it's really easy to get it up and down. And then what you want to do is clip these back into place just to secure it. And we're doing the same thing here with the nipper. You can see the clasp. It won't unfold if you haven't released the clasp. So we undo the clasp. I'm going to get it by the handle, just because I find it easier to do it that way. You can hear it all clicking into place. And then same thing, push these in. And then you have this back up. Oh, I've got to unlock it, otherwise it won't move. There we go. And lastly, now this doesn't have a clasp, so this will just come up, grab the handle. I think the frame's probably too big to fasten together with a clasp, but you can see you just put it back up into place. Now, some other things just to quickly mention is there are different colourways available. Obviously, we're looking at this in what's called the Raven Black on all three of them, but there are a choice of colours that you can choose from. And something with the out and about Pushchairs that's you really need to bear in mind is that the brakes do require some maintenance. So every so often it is advisable to take it apart, clean it and lubricate it as well. And if you do want any more information on that, there is plenty of information available either on the Out and About website, or you can find it if you have a look and Google it to see how you do it. But you will need to do that because, especially the off-road ones, there will be debris that goes into the brake unit and perhaps the wheels as well. So you do need to give them a little bit of care and attention at times. So that is the Out and About single Pushchairs. I hope it's given you a really good idea of the differences between the three and also the things that are the same between the range. And they are a really, really great pushchair. If you live in a rural area, you can't go wrong with an Out and About. They are really sturdy, they're going to last you for years, and they're so easy to use. And as I said with the GT, it's a real crossover pushchair here because it's not designed completely for, you know, very, very bumpy terrain, but you can use it on slightly less bumpy terrain, and also it will cross over really nicely into urban use. If you'd like any more information about the Out and About range, please go on to buggybaby.co.uk. If you've got any questions at all, leave them in the comments, and thank you for watching.